She made me sick the first time I met her. Teresa Miller shouted those words across the ballroom of a fancy hotel in Boston. The air conditioning was blasting, the scent of fading flowers lingering. About 50 guests turned to look, some mouths agape, others shifting away. I, Christine Harper, sat at the head table in a deep green dress, hands resting on the white tablecloth, unmoved. Teresa stood, champagne flute in hand. Her tight white dress made her look absurdly arrogant. My son, Daniel Harper, stood beside her, chewing shrimp and avoiding my gaze. "I can't take this anymore," Teresa said, voice hoarse. "Daniel, tell your mother. After the wedding, she can't live with us in that house anymore. It's horrible seeing her shuffle around the house in those slippers every day." Guests began to whisper. Mrs. Alma Johnson, my neighbor for 30 years, looked at me with pity. Mr. Robert Hayes, the butcher from the local market, clenched his fists. But no one spoke up. No one defended me. "Look," Teresa pointed at me. "She sits there like a statue. Every morning at 5 a.m., she gets up banging pots and pans in the kitchen like a ghost." Daniel finally looked up, face flushing. He drained his wine, then wiped his mouth. "Teresa, please," he said quietly. "Not here." "Why not?" Teresa laughed loudly. "Everyone already knows. Everyone knows your mother is a burden. A 64-year-old woman who does nothing but make lentil soup and watch old soap operas." Heat rose up my neck. My cheeks burned, but I remained seated, saying not a word. I gave a small smile, almost imperceptible, because they did not know what I knew. They did not know I had been preparing for 3 months. "After the wedding, we need the whole house to ourselves," Teresa continued, stepping closer to me. "Your mother can go to a care home. There are many good ones in Boston." Daniel nodded. My son nodded, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, as if I were nothing but an old, worthless object. "I hope you understand. Things will change. You've done your duty as a mother. Now it's time to step aside so we can live our lives." The room felt heavy. I heard every breath I took, the ticking of the clock on the wall. People waited for my reaction, expecting me to cry, scream, or run away defeated. But I am not a loser. Not after what I discovered. Not after the months I spent preparing for this exact moment. "Teresa," I said, calm and clear, "you said one thing right. It is time for things to change." The ballroom fell silent. Teresa smirked, thinking I had surrendered. Daniel breathed easier, believing everything would be settled. But then I did something no one expected. I raised my right hand, gave a slight signal to the MC standing by the sound table. He looked at me and nodded. He knew what to do because we had rehearsed many times. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC said, taking the mic, "the mother of the groom has prepared a special gift for the couple, a gift they will never forget." Teresa looked confused. Her smug smile began to fade. Daniel stopped chewing, mouth open. All eyes turned to the large screen hung on the main wall. The lights went out. The murmurs died away. I kept smiling, because after 64 years of life, 40 years of marriage, 35 years of motherhood, finally, my moment had come. The screen lit up, hummed softly, and began to play a video. A video that would change everything forever. That video would reveal who Daniel Harper and Teresa Miller really were. That video would free me, once and for all. In the darkness of the ballroom, as the screen started rolling, I thought only one thing. They did not know I had prepared everything. That for months I had gathered every piece of evidence, all to wait for this precise moment. My revenge had only just begun. Everything began 5 years ago. when my husband, Richard Harper, passed away from a heart attack. At that time, Daniel was 32, living in an apartment in downtown Boston. He worked for a construction materials company and often visited me every Sunday after church. He would bring muffins and freshly roasted coffee. We sat in the kitchen, talking about work, plans, and the women he dated. "Don't worry about anything, Mom," he said, holding my hand. "Dad told me to take care of you before he passed, and I promised him I would." Those words comforted me. I believed I wasn't alone, that my only son loved me just as deeply as I loved him. But everything changed when Daniel lost his job. The company went bankrupt. He drowned in bank debt and had to move out of his apartment. One night, he showed up at my house with 2 suitcases and red, tired eyes. "Just for a few months, Mom," he said, "until I find a new job." Of course, I agreed. He was my son, the only family I had left. The house was big and full of my husband's memories. I thought having him there would ease my loneliness. I didn't know it was the beginning of the worst nightmare of my life. The first few months went smoothly. Daniel looked for jobs during the day and watched movies with me at night. I cooked his favorite meals. He helped me carry groceries. Everything seemed fine, but he couldn't find a job. 6 months passed, then a year. He began drinking beer in the afternoons, staying up late watching videos on his phone. He stopped helping around the house and lost all motivation to look for work. "This city has no opportunities left," he complained. "They're all hiring young people who know technology." I tried to comfort him, saying things would get better, that he just needed patience. But deep down, I was worried. My son was changing, becoming irritable, short-tempered. And then Teresa Miller appeared. He met her at his cousin Lisa's birthday party. Teresa was 25, a secretary at a law firm in Boston, from a wealthy family. Her father owned 3 luxury clothing boutiques in the city center. That night, Daniel came home talking nonstop about her, as if he'd just met a goddess. "Mom, she's the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Smart, elegant, sophisticated, and she likes me too. I can't believe it." At first, I was genuinely happy for him. I thought having a girlfriend might lift his spirits, motivate him to find a job, and break free from his gloom. But when Teresa first visited our home, I instantly knew something was wrong. She wore an expensive dress and high heels, glancing around my house as if she had stepped into a filthy place. She sat on the couch without leaning back, as though afraid of dust. "Mrs. Christine," she said with a stiff smile, "Daniel has told me so much about you." "Your house is lovely," Teresa said, but her eyes said otherwise. She examined every old curtain, every worn-out piece of furniture, every faded family photo on the wall with a judgmental stare. During dinner, Teresa talked endlessly about her job, her friends, the fancy restaurants she often visited. Daniel sat there, mesmerized, his eyes glued to her bright red lips. "My family has a beach house in Cape Cod," Teresa said. "We should go there one weekend. You'd love it." After that night, Daniel completely changed. He started criticizing my cooking. "Teresa says you use too much salt. That's not good for your health." Then he criticized how I dressed. "Mom, why don't you buy something more modern? Teresa knows some stores that would be perfect for you." Bit by bit, my son drifted away. No more movies together, no more talks in the kitchen. At night, he went out with Teresa and came home late. On weekends, he stayed at her family's mansion by the beach in Cape Cod. Each time he returned, he found something new to complain about. "Your house is too old, Mom. You don't know how to cook modern food. Your friends are all old-fashioned." Once, he even said, "Teresa thinks you should learn how to use a computer. Older women who can't keep up with the times." It's embarrassing. And then, Teresa says this house needs a full renovation. Otherwise, it's worthless. It was always, Teresa says this. Teresa says that. As if her words mattered more than mine. As if she knew my home and my life better than I did. But the real shock came when Daniel announced he was getting married. It was a Tuesday evening. I was washing dishes when he walked in, holding a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "Mom, I have big news," he said, smiling brightly. Teresa said yes. She's going to marry me. I forced a smile, congratulated him, hugged him, but inside, a chill ran through me. A bad feeling I couldn't explain. "When's the wedding?" I asked. "6 months from now. Teresa wants a grand wedding. Her parents will cover everything." That night, after Daniel had fallen asleep, I lay awake, tossing and turning, thinking about how my son had changed, about the way Teresa looked at me, and about the future. For the first time in my life, I was afraid of being alone, not because my husband was gone, but because my own son was slowly becoming a stranger. Someone who no longer looked at me as his mother, but as Teresa did, an obstacle, an old piece of furniture with no value left. That night, I understood that my son was no longer the boy I once knew. He had turned into someone else, someone who frightened me. The first time I discovered the truth was on a Thursday afternoon. Daniel had gone out with Teresa to look at wedding dresses. I decided to clean his room, something he never bothered to do anymore. Under the bed, I found a thick folder. At first, I thought it was work papers, but then I saw my own name on one of the documents. I opened it, and my entire world collapsed. They were bank papers, loan documents Daniel had signed, using my house as collateral. The same house my husband Richard and I had spent 40 years working to buy, the house where Daniel had been born and raised. He had forged my signature and faked consent papers, stating that I agreed to use the house as security for a $200,000 loan. That money he had used it to buy a new car and pay for a luxury honeymoon in Hawaii, all according to Teresa's wishes. My hands trembled as I read. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might stop, just like my husband's had years ago. Daniel had lied, cheated, and gambled away the only home I had left. But the worst part wasn't over yet. I found more papers copies showing that Daniel had been researching nursing homes. The list had prices, addresses, services, and the cheapest ones were highlighted in yellow on a loose sheet. Written in Daniel's own handwriting were the words, "Mom, Sunny Pines Retirement Home. $8,000 per month, close to the hospital, in case she gets sick." I sank onto the bed, clutching the papers in my hands. My chest tightened, and I knew my life would never be the same again. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My son, the person I had trusted more than anyone in the world, was planning to send me to a nursing home. He had decided my future without even asking me. But the cruelest part lay at the bottom of the folder, a yellow envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter from Teresa to Daniel. It read, "My love, I talked to my parents, and they agreed. After the wedding, your mother can't live with us. We can't start a new family with an old woman in the house. I've already checked Sunny Pines is a great place, with 24-hour nurses and lots of activities to keep her busy. If we sell a few of your mom's old things, we can cover the first 3 months. Don't feel guilty. This is what's best for everyone." I read that letter 5 times. Every word felt like a knife stabbing straight into my chest. Teresa didn't just despise me, she had convinced Daniel that I was a burden, an obstacle that needed to be removed. I put everything back exactly as it was, closed the folder, and pushed it under the bed again. My legs trembled as I walked to the kitchen. I poured a glass of water but couldn't swallow a drop. For 2 hours, I just sat there and cried. Cried for the son who was no longer my son. for the family I had lost without realizing it, and for the future that others had already decided for me without asking my permission. When Daniel came home that night, my tears were gone. I had made a decision. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't weep. I would watch, listen, and prepare. If my son could betray me like that, I needed to know just how far his Naudus betrayal would go. "How was the dress shopping?" I asked, as he poured himself some water. "Great, Mom," he said casually. "Teresa found a beautiful one, a bit expensive, but her parents are helping." He lied so naturally, smiling at me like I was some clueless old woman. "That's wonderful for you two," I said, forcing a smile. "You both deserve the best." That night, after Daniel went to bed, I began my own investigation. I checked every document: the house deed, my husband's insurance papers, the bank statements. I realized Daniel had been rummaging through my things for months. Some papers were out of order. Others showed photocopy marks. Then, I discovered something that chilled my blood. An audio recording app on his phone was open on the kitchen counter. Inside were a series of audio files, recordings of our conversations from the past 3 months. I put in headphones and tried one file. It was the part where I talked about my nest egg, savings. My voice was clear, listing the exact amount. Daniel had been recording me, collecting information about my money, my assets, and my private matters. That night, sitting alone in the dark kitchen, I realized the situation was worse than I had thought. They didn't just want to kick me out, they planned to strip me of everything and possibly record and film me to build a case that I was a confused old woman who needed a guardian. For the first time in 64 years of life, I felt real fear. Fear of my own son. Fear of being abandoned in a nursing home, alone, while they lived in my house with my money. But woven through that fear was a cold, calculated anger. Anger didn't make me scream or weep, it made me plan. If Daniel and Teresa wanted to play dirty, I would teach them what dirty really looks like. If they thought they could manipulate an old, foolish woman, they were about to find out they had chosen the wrong person. That night, while they slept soundly, thinking everything was under control, I began to draw up my counterattack. After 40 years of marriage, I had learned to notice every detail. They didn't know that the quiet, meek woman they saw every day was only a mask, and now that mask was about to fall. The next morning, I woke as usual, but the woman from last night was gone, and a new Christine had been born. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with a new notebook. On the first page, I wrote, "Plan to take down Daniel Harper and Teresa Miller." Under that heading, I listed everything I had discovered: the forged loan, the plot to put me in a nursing home, the secret audio recordings, Teresa's letter. I had evidence, but I needed more. When Daniel came downstairs for breakfast, I was ready for my first act. "Son," I said, placing a plate of scrambled eggs in front of him, "I thought about what you said about the wedding last night. I think you're right. This house is too old for a young couple." Daniel looked up, surprised. "Really, Mom?" "Yes," I said, forcing a smile. "Teresa deserves to start married life in a new, nicer place. You two need your own space." Daniel's eyes lit up. He thought he had won, that I would leave quietly and obediently. "So, where would you go?" he asked. I pretended to consider. "I've looked at a few places. There are many great options for seniors like me. Nurses, activities, friends." Of course, that was a lie. But I needed Daniel to believe his plan was going smoothly, to let his guard down. "If you think that, I'm so glad. Teresa will be thrilled too." After breakfast, Daniel left whistling, convinced he had won and that I would leave peacefully, leaving everything to him. The moment he walked out the door, I grabbed the phone and called Edward Collins, an attorney, and my late husband's closest friend for more than 3 decades. Edward is 72 years old, retired, but he still advises close friends on legal matters. Edward, I need to see you urgently, I said, my voice trembling but firm. This is very serious. Of course, Christine, he replied, worried. Do you want me to come to the house? No. Better at your office. And Edward, this must be absolutely confidential. No one can know I'm coming to see you. An hour later, I was sitting in his small office in downtown Boston. On the wall hung a photo of him with my late husband, Richard Harper. Taken in 1995, both smiling brightly at the opening ceremony of their first company. I told him everything. The forged loan, the documents Daniel had signed using my fake signature, Teresa's letter, and the secret audio recordings. Edward listened carefully, occasionally shaking his head, his face full of disappointment and sympathy. When I finished, he removed his glasses and wiped his eyes. Christine, he said, slowly, this is very serious. Daniel committed document forgery and financial fraud. If this goes to court, he could face several years in prison. I don't want my son to go to prison, Edward, I said, my voice trembling. He's my son. But I also don't want to spend the rest of my life in a nursing home while they live comfortably in my house, spending my money. So, what do you want to do? I want to protect myself. I want to make sure they can't hurt me, and I want them to learn a lesson they'll never forget. Edward looked at me, then smiled softly for the first time since I'd walked in. I always knew you were sharper than your gentle appearance suggested. Richard used to tell me, Edward, my Christine may look sweet, but she has the sharpest mind I've ever met. For the next 2 hours, we crafted a perfect plan together. First, he would launch a legal investigation into the forged loan in my name. Second, he would help me rewrite my entire will, one Daniel knew nothing about. Third, we would record every illegal act and conspiracy between Daniel and Teresa. You need undeniable proof, Edward said. You must record them clearly discussing their plan to prove intentional fraud and manipulation. He showed me how to use a mini voice recorder, no bigger than a coin, that could be hidden inside a shirt pocket or handbag. He also taught me how to lead them into incriminating conversations. Are you sure you want to do this, Christine? He asked, seriously. Once you start, there's no turning back. I'm sure, I replied, looking straight at him. I've been a devoted wife for 40 years, a selfless mother for 35. Now it's time to be a woman who knows how to protect herself. I left Edward's office with a small recorder tucked in my pocket and a detailed plan for the next 4 months. 4 months to gather enough evidence, 4 months to build the perfect trap. That afternoon, I stopped by an electronics store near Cambridge to buy more equipment. A larger voice recorder to hide in the bedroom, and a small camera disguised as a decorative object for the living room. The young salesman was enthusiastic, showing me how to use each device. I'm buying these to watch the house while I travel, I lied. You're doing the right thing, he smiled. Safety first. When I got home, Daniel was in the living room, talking on the phone with Teresa. He had no idea I was standing in the kitchen, hearing everything. Yes, darling, he said. I talked to Mom this morning. She agreed. She said she'll find a retirement home herself. I froze. My hand clenched so tightly it turned white. No, don't worry. I think she's even relieved. You know how old people are. They always think they're a burden. And the money? Once she's gone, I'll sell a few things from the house that'll cover the first few months' expenses. After that, I'll find a way to cancel Dad's life insurance policy. It's still under her name. Each word stabbed straight into my chest, but every stab was recorded. Love you, Teresa, he continued. Soon we'll have this house all to ourselves. Everything will be perfect. When he hung up, I stepped out with a gentle smile. Talking to Teresa, honey? Yes, Mom, he said cheerfully. I just told her you decided to find a place. She's so happy. That's wonderful, I said, hiding my emotions. Have you two picked a wedding date yet? Maybe February. Teresa wants a spring wedding. Perfect. I'll start looking at nursing homes tomorrow. I want everything ready in advance. Daniel hugged me. You're the best mom in the world. Teresa's right. You're so smart for making that decision. I let him hug me, but in my head there was only one thought. Every word he said had been recorded, and each of those words would become incontestable evidence against him. That night, after dinner, I went up to my room early. I hid the large recorder under the bed and set it to record all night. I wanted to know what Daniel and Teresa would say. When they thought I was asleep, the next morning, I listened back, and my heart tightened. Around 11 p.m., Teresa came over. They were in Daniel's room for 2 hours, discussing my future, as if I were already gone. Have you checked what this house is worth yet? Teresa asked. Uncle says, at least $500,000, Daniel replied. This area is rising. Perfect, Teresa said. With that money, we can throw the big wedding and remodel the whole house. What if your mom changes her mind? She won't change her mind. Old people like that always give in eventually. Besides, she already signed the loan papers. Even if she regrets it, she can't undo it. Hearing them coldly plot to take my life away felt like knife blades cutting into my chest. Word by word, I felt clearly. The motherly bond between me and Daniel was dead. They weren't just greedy, they were cruel. They planned to steal everything I'd worked for my whole life, then live off my pain. But what Daniel and Teresa didn't know was I had a plan too, and my plan would be far more perfect. In the days that followed, I kept playing the role of the dutiful, submissive mother. Each morning, I pretended to read the paper, marking a few nursing homes in the Boston suburbs. Each afternoon, I told Daniel that I'd called to ask for information. Each night, I quietly listened and recorded every secret conversation. The quiet, fragile woman of before had awoken, and now Christine Harper was ready for war. 3 months later, I became the best actress in the world. Every day, I performed the part of an elderly mother, accepting her fate, while inside, I gathered evidence like a professional detective. The recordings piled up. Daniel and Teresa talked nearly every night about selling my house, renovating it, and taking money from Richard's life insurance, my late husband's policy. After the wedding, we'll change all the locks, Teresa said. So, Mom can't come back, even if she regrets it. If she needs anything, give her an hour to take a few basics. The rest we'll sell or throw away. In a nursing home, she won't need anything. Meanwhile, Edward Collins, my husband's longtime friend and lawyer, helped me rewrite the entire will, which Daniel knew nothing about. From now on, all my assets, money, and the house would be donated to a children's charity in Massachusetts. Daniel wouldn't get a single cent. Are you sure, Christine? Edward asked, looking at me over his round glasses. He's your only son, he said. I looked out the window, where snow was falling lightly. My son has been dead for a long time, I replied. The man living in my house is a stranger who wants to steal everything. We also investigated the fraudulent loan. Edward hired a private investigator, and the results confirmed. Daniel had forged my signature. We had enough evidence to put him in prison for at least 5 years, but I didn't want court justice. I wanted a justice that tasted like revenge. The idea of the video came to me one night in November. Daniel and Teresa were watching a TV show about extravagant weddings, talking about their dream wedding. My dream is a wedding everyone will remember, Teresa said, her eyes lighting up. Make people talk about it for years. In that moment, I knew what to do. I would give Teresa a wedding she would never forget, but not for the reason she expected. The next day, I called Edward and explained the plan. Hire a video editor. Gather all the recordings where they talk about getting me into a nursing home, selling the house, and stealing my money. For what? Edward asked. I'll play that video right at their engagement party, in front of all their friends, family, and colleagues. Edward was silent for a few seconds, then burst out laughing. Christine, you're formidable. I like the way you think. We began preparing like a military campaign. The video editor was a young man Edward had worked with on divorce cases. He knew how to stitch sound and image so that every second hit like a knife. Miss Christine, he said, when I explained the idea, this video will be like a time bomb when it plays. Everything will explode. The video is 15 minutes long, flawless to every frame. It starts with photos of Daniel as a child, with me and Richard in the backyard. In Cambridge, a gentle score plays, looking like a touching tribute film. Then, abruptly, Daniel's voice appears. My mother isn't all there anymore. She's a burden. Next is Teresa's voice. Soon we'll move her to Sunny Pines. She'll no longer bother anyone. Conversations about selling furniture, taking the money, changing the locks, and voiding the life insurance, all with dates, authentic audio, real voices. The video ends with white text on a black background. So everyone knows who Daniel Harper and Teresa Miller really are. Meanwhile, I kept playing the innocent mother role. Each week, I went out, looking at nursing homes, bringing back a few brochures. Have you chosen a place yet? Daniel asked. I'm deciding between 2. I lied, smiling sweetly. One is closer to downtown, the other has more activities. That's fine, Mom, Daniel said. Take your time. We just want you to be happy. His voice was so fake, I had to fight not to laugh. By December, Teresa announced they would host a large engagement party before the wedding. All relatives, friends, and neighbors were invited. The party will be at a fancy hotel in Boston, Daniel said. Teresa wants it to be really luxurious. Wonderful, I replied calmly. Can I help with anything? No, need Mom. Teresa's parents will handle everything. You just need to come and enjoy. Perfect. I couldn't have asked for a better opportunity. A week before the party, I called Mr. John Becker, a longtime neighbor the man hired to MC the event. Mr. John, I said, I need you for a special request. I want to play a surprise video for Daniel and Teresa during the party. Of course, Miss Christine. When would you like me to play it? When I give the signal, I replied. Calm voice, eyes cold. It must be at the right moment, because this will be the most surprising gift of their lives. Mr. John agreed immediately. Asking no questions, he thought I was just a sweet mother preparing a touching present for her son. The final days before the party were the hardest. Daniel and Teresa were ecstatic, talking all day about the engagement party, guests, and their perfect night. "Everything's set, Mom," Daniel told me the night before. "You've found a comfortable place to live. We're starting our new life. Everybody wins." "Yes," I smiled. "Everyone will get exactly what they deserve." That night, I couldn't sleep, not from worry, but from anticipation. After months of enduring humiliation, lies, and betrayal, my moment of revenge had finally come. I woke up early and prepared carefully. I chose the dark blue dress, stopped at the Main Street hair salon, and put on the pearl earrings Richard gave me for our 20th anniversary. I wanted to be perfect for the moment of triumph. When we arrived at the community hall in Massachusetts, everything was decorated with white flowers and warm yellow lights. Guests began to arrive. Neighbors, Daniel's friends, Teresa's family, everyone dressed elegantly, eager for an evening of happiness. But only I knew this would be a night they would never forget. A night when the truth would be exposed. A night when Christine Harper would stop being the victim and become the bearer of justice. The hall glittered like a wedding magazine. Women wore evening gowns, holding champagne flutes, laughter filling the air. The head table was decorated with white roses and golden candles. I sat in the place of honor, beside Daniel and Teresa, in the dark blue dress, the pearl earrings, and the smile I had practiced for months. The smile of a proud mother, but inside was the cold calm of someone holding all the winning cards. Teresa dazzled in her tight white gown, moving through the crowd like a queen, accepting compliments, posing for photos, savoring every second in the spotlight. Daniel looked at her with the starry-eyed devotion of a fanatic. Mrs. Christine, Mrs. Alma Johnson, a longtime neighbor, came over to our table. "You look beautiful tonight. Everything is so lavish." "Thank you, Elma. Teresa has great taste for parties," I replied with a smile. "Have you set a wedding date?" "February," I said, keeping the smile. "By then, I'll have moved to my new place." "A new place?" Mrs. Alma asked, surprised. "Yes," I answered. "I decided to move somewhere more suitable for my age. Young people need their own space." I did not say that the new place was actually the nursing home my son and future daughter-in-law planned to send me to. I only smiled and changed the subject. By 8:30 p.m., the party began. Appetizers were salad, followed by pumpkin soup, roasted chicken with garlic butter, rice, and black beans. The food was good, the mood lively. Teresa stood to speak, thanking everyone, talking about love, happiness, and "I'd like to give a special thanks to my future mother-in-law," she said, looking at me. Guests applauded. Few looked at me fondly, thinking Teresa was honoring me. They didn't know she was mocking me. Then Daniel stood up, thanking Teresa's parents for hosting, speaking about future plans, about the soon-to-be renovated house, and about the children they hoped for. "My mother always taught me family is the most important thing," Daniel said. "And now, our family will grow." As he spoke, I discreetly opened my purse, my fingers touching the small remote tucked inside. Mr. John the MC glanced at me from time to time, waiting for the signal. Not yet. I wanted them to say more. I wanted them to bury themselves with lies in front of everyone. By 9 p.m., the toasts began. Teresa's parents spoke sweetly about love and marriage. Daniel's friends recalled college memories. Everyone raised glasses to congratulate the couple. Then Teresa did something unexpected, off script. She stood again and raised her hand for silence. "There's one more thing I want to say tonight," she announced, strong and confident. "Something people should know about our family situation." Daniel looked at her, bewildered, not knowing what was coming. "Our wedding," Teresa continued, "will bring many changes. Necessary changes to start a new, proper life." My heart raced. I knew what she was about to say. "For example," Teresa smiled, her smile not reaching her eyes. "My future mother-in-law has decided to move to a place more suitable for her age, a place where she'll have friends, care, and fun." The room murmured. Some people looked confused, others embarrassed. "That's a very brave decision," Teresa continued. "Not every older woman has the courage to admit she can't live alone anymore." Right. This was the public humiliation I'd been waiting for. Teresa couldn't hold back. She had to prove she'd won, that I had lost. "I truly admire Mrs. Christine," Teresa went on, "for recognizing her limits and making the right choice." The air in the hall grew thick. People didn't know whether to applaud or stay silent. Daniel's face flushed as he signaled Teresa to stop. But she was too excited, and when a cruel person starts to gloat, they can't stop. At first, I thought it would be hard to persuade her, Teresa laughed, but it turned out to be easier than I expected. After all, the elderly eventually understand when they're no longer useful. Those words hit me like a slap in the face. The room fell utterly silent. Many guests stared at one another. Mrs. Alma Johnson uttered a soft gasp, and Mr. George Miller, Teresa's father, clenched his fist, his face red. "Teresa," Daniel said softly, his voice wavering. "Please." "What?" she replied, shrugging defiantly. "I'm just speaking the truth. Your mother has lived her life, she's had children, been a wife. Now it's time for her to step aside so the younger generation can grow." The venom in Teresa's voice could no longer be hidden. She was no longer playing the perfect daughter-in-law. Her true face was fully exposed before everyone, and that was the moment I had been waiting for. I stood up slowly. All eyes in the hall turned to me. Teresa fell silent, waiting for me to collapse, sob, or run away in shame. But instead, I smiled. A real smile, wide, calm, and satisfied. "Teresa," I said clearly, firmly, "you were right about one thing. Tonight will be a night to remember." I reached into my purse for the small remote, looked at Mr. John Becker, the MC, and nodded slightly. "Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. John said into the microphone, the groom's mother has prepared a special surprise for the couple." The lights in the hall dimmed. The large screen lit up to gentle music. Teresa looked at me, puzzled. Daniel frowned, tilting his head. And my revenge began. On the screen appeared photos of Daniel as a child, playing in the yard, blowing out birthday candles, graduating high school. The music was soft and tender, just like a touching tribute video any mother would want to prepare for her son. Guests smiled fondly. Teresa relaxed in her seat. Daniel breathed a sigh of relief, thinking this was just a sentimental gift. Then the music shifted. The gentle piano vanished, replaced by heavy, tense drums. The family photos faded, replaced by images of bank documents, loan contracts, forged signatures. "What is this?" Daniel muttered, sitting bolt upright. Bold text appeared on the screen. "The real plan of Daniel Harper and Teresa Miller." The room dropped into absolute silence. Teresa went pale, panic in her eyes. Daniel moved as if to stand, but I gently placed my hand on his arm. "Sit down, son," I said calmly. "We're only getting started." Sound came through the speaker's Daniel's voice, clear and unmistakable. My mother's old. She's not of sound mind. We need to put her in a nursing home before she finds out what we're doing. The entire room held its breath. Mrs. Alma covered her mouth with her hand. Mr. George Miller shook his head, unable to believe what he was hearing. It's not real, Teresa screamed, jumping to her feet. It's fake. But right after that, the second recording played Teresa's own voice. Old women like her always do what they're told. Besides, she's already signed the loan papers. Even if she regrets it, there's no going back. The air thickened, as if the entire room had frozen. More than 50 guests sat in stunned silence, their eyes glued to the screen, listening to how my son and his fiancée plotted to steal everything I had. "Turn it off!" Daniel shouted, reaching forward. "Leave it," I said calmly. "Didn't you say you wanted a wedding no one would ever forget?" The third recording played even crueler than before. Teresa's cold voice said, "Give her 1 hour to grab what she needs. The rest sell or toss out. At the nursing home, she won't need anything anyway." Some guests stood up, some furious, others wanting to leave, but no one could look away from the screen. "This is illegal," Teresa yelled. "You can't record private conversations." "Private?" I replied, my voice steady. "In my own house, while you plotted to rob me, you call that private?" The video continued. Daniel's voice came through, talking about forging my signature to take out a bank loan. Teresa's voice followed, calculating how much money they'd make from selling my home. The two of them laughed loudly, proud of how easily they had deceived me. "After the wedding, we'll change all the locks," Teresa said in the recording, "so his mom can't come back, even if she regrets it." Teresa's father, Mr. George, shot to his feet, his face red with shame and anger. "Teresa, what is the meaning of this?" he roared. "Dad, don't believe them. She's crazy," Teresa shouted, her eyes wild, her hands trembling, but it was far too late. The room was filled only with the sound of their own betrayal and the cold gaze of me, Christine Harper, the woman they thought would never fight back. But it was too late. The video continued, showing real documents, forged signatures, and undeniable evidence. The final part silenced the hall completely. Daniel and Teresa discussing my late husband Richard's life insurance policy. "Once she's in the nursing home, we'll find a way to cancel her insurance policy. That money should be ours." "Enough!" Daniel roared, slamming his hand on the table. "Turn it off!" But I didn't stop. Not after months of humiliation and betrayal. Not after they tried to steal 40 years of my hard work. "There's more," I said, my voice calm, chillingly calm. The screen showed flyers from nursing homes in Massachusetts that Daniel had researched, along with his handwritten notes where he carefully calculated costs and wrote clearly, "Sunny Pines Retirement Home, $8,000 per month, near hospital, private room, 24/7 care." The murmurs in the room turned into angry shouts. Several guests stood up. Some began yelling at Daniel and Teresa. Others quietly left the hall without a word. "You monsters!" Mrs. Alma Johnson shouted. "How could you treat your own mother like that? You both deserve to be in prison. Disgraceful." Mr. George Miller, Teresa's father, growled, his face crimson with rage. Teresa desperately tried to explain. "You're misunderstanding. We only want what's best for her." I stood up, my gaze sweeping the room. My voice rang out clear and strong through the microphone. "The best thing for me? Stealing my house is the best thing. For me? Forging my signature is the best thing for me? And forcing me into a nursing home against my will, that's the best thing for me?" Daniel hung his head. Eyes rimmed with tears, but those were not tears of remorse, only anger at being exposed. "Mom, please," he stammered. "Can we talk in private?" "No," I shouted. "No more private talks. No more lies. For months you treated me like a fool, but I heard everything, saw everything, and recorded it all." The video reached its finale. On the screen, the final words appeared, big and clear. "This is the true story of Daniel Harper and Teresa Miller, so everyone knows who they really are." The room fell silent. No one spoke a word. No one knew where to look. Then Teresa broke the silence with a wild scream. This is just the revenge of a bitter old woman, unable to accept that her son no longer needs her. That was her final mistake, because that sentence only proved the recordings true. I looked her in the eye, my voice steady and firm. "You were right about one thing, Teresa. I am an old woman. But I am not stupid, and I am certainly not a victim." I walked to the microphone Mr. John Becker had placed on the nearby table. It was time for my final speech. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my tone calm but steel strong, "I am sorry you had to witness this, but the truth must be told." Those remaining guests looked at me with a mix of pity and respect. I have pretended for months, pretended to be the meek, weak mother, while in truth, I was collecting evidence, recording everything, preparing for this moment. Daniel and Teresa sat stunned, broken, at a loss. No one has the right to decide my future without asking me. No one has the right to steal the life's work I built. And no one has the right to treat me like garbage. My revenge was complete, but the final blow was still to come. The room was completely quiet. Daniel buried his face in his hands. Teresa sobbed, makeup streaking her white dress. But I was not finished. The video was only the opening. The real finale was still waiting. "Edward," I said, looking toward the back of the room, "could you come up here?" Edward Collins, my lawyer, and the man who had worked with my late husband for more than 30 years, stood and walked forward, slowly. He had sat quietly, watching from the start, waiting for my signal. In his hands were a pair of black leather folders, holding the most important documents of my life. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, taking up the microphone again, "allow me to introduce Attorney Edward Collins, my late husband's legal counsel for many years, and now my legal representative." Daniel looked up, startled. "A lawyer? Why do you need a lawyer, Mom?" "To protect myself from thieves," I replied, my eyes fixed on him. "Edward, please tell everyone what we have uncovered." Edward Collins cleared his throat and opened the black leather briefcase in his hands. "After investigating the documents that Mrs. Christine Harper provided," he said, his voice clear, "we confirm that Daniel Harper committed forgery to secure a bank loan, using his mother's house as collateral." Murmurs began to spread through the hall. Daniel went pale as a ghost. "The loan amount was $200,000. Edward continued. "That money was used by Daniel to buy a car, luxury items, and to put a down payment on a honeymoon in Hawaii." "That's not true!" Daniel shouted, his voice choked. "Mom, let me do it!" "Let you?" Edward said with a cold smile. "Do you have any paperwork to prove that? Any document with your mother's signature authorizing you to mortgage the house?" Daniel fell silent, because he had nothing. "Furthermore," Edward went on, his tone heavy, "we have evidence that Daniel Harper planned to put his mother into a nursing home against her will while seizing her assets. This conduct constitutes asset fraud and elder abuse under Massachusetts law." Teresa Miller, her face white, her voice trembling, tried to protest. "You can't prove anything. Can't we?" Edward produced a small recording device from his breast pocket. "All of the conversations you just heard in the video were recorded inside this house over the past 3 months. We have more than 20 hours of recordings in which the two of them planned in detail how to seize the property and abandon Mrs. Christine. The room seemed to freeze. Every word Edward spoke landed like a hammer blow. "But that's not all," I said, my voice steady. "Edward, show them the new will." Edward pulled out a notarized packet of documents. "Mrs. Christine Harper changed her will 2 months ago," he said. "From now on, Daniel Harper is no longer the legal heir to any of her assets." Daniel leapt up as if struck by electricity. "Mom can't do that. I'm her only son." "You used to be her only son," I replied, my voice cold as steel. "Now you're just a stranger living illegally in your mother's house." Teresa sobbed. "So, where will all that property go?" I looked at her and spoke slowly, enunciating each word. "All of my assets, savings, and life insurance will be donated to Street Mary's Children's Home, a place where children truly need help, not to greedy people trying to steal from their own mother." Daniel staggered, clutching the back of a chair to keep from falling. "Mom, please, can we talk? Can we work this out quietly?" "Work it out?" I laughed coldly. "Like the way you worked it out when you forged my signature? When you calculated how much you'd gain from my death? When you planned to shove me into a nursing home to take this house?" Edward held up another paper. "We have also obtained a legal eviction order. Daniel Harper has 24 hours to vacate his mother's house." "Illegal!" Teresa screamed. "You can't throw him out like that." "Illegal." Edward looked at her with contempt. "I think illegal is forging someone's signature and stealing their property." The hall erupted. Guests exchanged angry whispers. Some shook their heads in disappointment at Daniel. I stepped closer to my son, looking straight at the face that once made me proud, the man I raised with love, time, and my whole life. "Daniel," I said quietly but clearly, "for 35 years I gave you everything. My love, my strength, and my trust. But you repaid me by stealing everything, and by trying to throw me away into a nursing home like old trash." Tears streamed down Daniel's face, but it was far too late for tears. "Mom," he stammered, his voice breaking. "Shut your mouth." I cut him off. "You no longer have the right to call me Mom. That word is for children who know respect and love. And you," I looked straight at him, "are nothing but a thief that came out of my own body." I turned to Teresa Miller, who sat crying, mascara running down her cheeks. "And you, Teresa, you once said I disgusted you from the first day we met, that you wanted to get rid of me like some old piece of junk. But now, it's you who disgusts me, not because of your looks, but because of your rotten heart and poisonous soul." Edward closed the file folder, then looked at me and asked, "Mrs. Christine, do you wish to pursue criminal charges?" The room held its breath. Daniel and Teresa stared at me in horror. They knew I had enough evidence to send them both to prison for many years. I stayed silent for a few seconds, thinking about justice, revenge, 40 years of marriage, and 35 years of motherhood and sacrifice. Then I said, "No, I won't send them to prison." Daniel let out a sigh of relief, but I wasn't finished. "If either of you ever come near me again, try to contact me, or even walk down this street, Edward will immediately file everything with the court." I stepped up to the microphone one last time. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, "I'm sorry you had to witness this, but sometimes the truth must be exposed no matter how painful it is." At first, the hall was silent. Then came a hesitant round of applause, followed by louder, stronger clapping. Mrs. Alma Johnson stood up and shouted, "Well done, Christine! Those bastards got what they deserved." Applause filled the room. For the first time in years, I felt respected, acknowledged powerful. Daniel and Teresa gathered their things in silence, leaving the hall without a word. Teresa's parents followed behind, heads bowed in shame. The room slowly emptied. A few guests came up to hug me, offering kind words of comfort. When only Edward Collins and I remained, he looked at me gently and asked, "How do you feel, Christine?" I sat down, taking a deep breath. "Free," I said. "For the first time in years, I feel completely free." But I knew true freedom would only come when I returned to my own home, when Daniel was no longer there, when I could walk through those rooms without fear, and when I could finally begin my new life. 3 days later, the house was empty. Daniel came to collect his things with 2 friends and a moving truck. He didn't say a word to me, didn't even look at me. He just packed everything and left forever. Teresa didn't show up. Perhaps she didn't have the courage to face me after what happened. I walked down the hallway of the now empty house and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. Not the suffocating silence of fear, but the golden quiet of freedom. Daniel's room no longer smelled of beer and dirty socks. The living room was free of scattered video games. The kitchen had no more dirty dishes waiting for me to wash like a maid. After 5 years, the house truly belonged to me again. That night, I slept better than I ever had. No more secret whispers. No more pretending to be asleep. No more playing the role of the foolish old woman. The next morning, my new life began. Edward helped me cancel the fraudulent loan. After reviewing all the evidence, the bank decided not to press charges against Daniel, but erased the debt immediately and placed a permanent warning on his credit file, making it nearly impossible for him to borrow money again. "That's a kind of justice, too," Edward said. "He's not in prison, but he won't be able to deceive anyone again." I replaced every lock in the house to make sure Daniel could never come back, even with an old key. The first few days felt strange. After so many years of living with others, the quietness of the house was almost shocking. But it wasn't the loneliness of sadness, it was the solitude of freedom, of doing whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. I watched my favorite movies without anyone mocking me. I cooked my lentil stew without anyone calling it too salty. I walked around in slippers without anyone saying I looked like a ridiculous old lady. Within a few days, the story spread through the neighborhood. Everyone talked about that disastrous engagement party. Some congratulated me when they saw me on the street. Others looked at me with a mix of pity and admiration. Every afternoon, Mrs. Alma stopped by to visit, saying, "Christine, I never thought you had it in you. I always thought you were so gentle, so patient." I just smiled, because it was true that gentle, patient woman was gone. The one living now is me, a free woman. "I didn't know I could do it either," I said. Sometimes we don't realize our true strength until there's no other choice left. A week later, I received a call I never expected. It was Teresa Miller's mother, Mrs. "Christine," she said, her voice full of shame. "I want to apologize on behalf of my daughter. We had no idea what she was planning." "I know," I replied. "You're not to blame for what your child does." "Teresa is devastated," she continued. "She says you ruined her life." I was silent for a moment, then said, "I didn't ruin anyone's life. I only revealed the truth. They destroyed their own lives with the choices they made. Is there any way to fix things for you to forgive them?" "I'll be honest," I said. "Forgiveness is for those who truly repent. Your daughter and my son aren't sorry for what they did to me, they're only sorry they got caught. And those are two very different things." After that call, she never contacted me again. 2 weeks later, Edward Collins came by with news about Daniel and Teresa. "They broke up?" he said. "Teresa's family canceled the engagement." and Daniel moved to another city. Are you sad? Edward asked. I answered honestly. I'm only sad for the son I thought I had, but the truth is, that son never existed. The person who lived in my house all that time was just a stranger. A month later, I made a decision that even surprised me. I was going to travel. All my life, I'd lived in a small town in Massachusetts where I was born, married, and raised my child. I had never been away for more than 2 days. But now, I had savings, time, and freedom. I bought a bus ticket to New York City, the first trip of my life that I took alone. For the first time, I did something just for myself, without asking permission or informing anyone. The trip was wonderful. I admired the towering buildings, strolled through Central Park, and chatted with kind strangers on the street. I stayed in a small, clean hotel, ate apple pie in the mornings, and sat by the window watching the city lights at night. During those 5 days, I realized something important. I wasn't just Daniel's mother. I wasn't just Richard's widow. I was no longer the victim of a family betrayal. I was Christine Harper, 64 years old, a woman with her whole life ahead of her, with places to go, stories to tell, and reasons to live. When I came home, I began changing my house. I painted the walls brighter colors, bought new plants, replaced the curtains, and swapped out some furniture to suit my taste. I started going out more. I joined a group of older women who played bingo every Wednesday. I went to church on Sundays, not out of obligation, but because I found peace there. I even bought new clothes dresses that made me feel beautiful, shoes that were both comfortable and elegant, and small, sparkling earrings that caught the light when I moved. 6 months after that engagement party, I was sitting in my garden drinking coffee when a letter arrived by express mail. It was from a lawyer in a nearby city. Inside was a letter from Daniel. He apologized, said he had realized his mistakes, and begged for my forgiveness for another chance. I read the letter twice, then folded it and placed it in a drawer. I didn't reply, not out of cruelty, and not because I couldn't forgive, but because I had learned something important. Forgiveness doesn't mean becoming a victim again. Forgiveness doesn't mean allowing someone to hurt you twice. I could forgive Daniel in my heart. I could wish him well in his new life. But that didn't mean I had to let him back into mine. Some decisions are permanent, and walking away from the one who betrayed you is one of them. That evening, I sat in my newly decorated living room, looking around the warm, peaceful space and reflecting on everything, on the woman I used to be and the woman I had become. I had lost a son, but I regained my dignity. I had lost a family, but I found my freedom. I had lost the illusion of being loved unconditionally, but I discovered something even stronger, the ability to love myself. I stood up and looked into the mirror in the living room. A 64-year-old woman with silver hair and wrinkled skin stared back, but in her eyes, there was something new: strength, determination, and peace. I whispered to myself, my story is just beginning. And for the first time in decades, those words didn't scare me, they gave me hope. Because at 64, I had learned the most important lesson of my life. It's never too late to protect your dignity. It's never too late to start over. And it's never, ever too late to be free.